Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the katana, okay, the Japanese sword. And I kind of wanted to compare it to some of the European swords and help you guys kind of figure out, its place in history and in combat. Um, the key characteristic of the katana is that it has a slight curve in it and it is very sharp, okay? The katana, basically you can cut paper. I mean, I can take, let's say, a sharp European sword, and I can hold it. I mean, yeah, it's got an edge, but it's not a razor. I could make it razor sharp, but it's really not necessary because that's not how this sword is used. Okay, with the katana, because it has that curved edge and it is razor sharp, what you typically do with this, you do slicing cuts. Okay, so as you strike, you pull. So strike and pull. Okay, so you make slicing cuts with the katana. Okay, all right. You can see how it bites in really nice into that wood because it is razor sharp. Oh, missed that one. Okay, it is razor sharp, and it really doesn't take much effort to make one of these slicing cuts. Okay, so you just gotta basically just pull the sword and draw it as you cut. Okay, this is a slicing weapon. You can see how I'm just basically just slicing away at that wood because I'm not just hacking into it. I mean, if I just hack into it, it's not. I mean, it can work, but it's not going to be as effective. Okay, but if I make a slicing cut, all of a sudden you see pieces of wood coming off of this post over here. Okay, so this is a slicing weapon. Now, there's a couple of reasons why the katana probably developed the way it developed. The steel in Japan was not of as good a quality as the steel in Europe. It took a lot more effort to work the steel. They had to clean it, fold it, to purify it, to make a good sword out of it. And it makes sense to me that they would not want to beat the sword up as much. So it makes sense that they would have developed a style that was less abusive on the sword. Okay, so by drawing and slicing, okay, as you can see, it's that action is a lot less stressful on the sword. Okay, as you're making this slicing cut. Okay, right? You see how it's just slicing. Okay, I'm not banging the sword, and in fact the katana typically does not have a full tang. The blade does not go all the way into the handle. It usually stops about 3/4 of the way. So it does not have, the handle, the blade is not fully extended into the handle. Okay, and the katana, was not the primary weapon of the samurai. Their primary weapon was the bow and the polearm. Okay, and the polearm is basically, basically it's a pole with some type of metal object at the end. It could be a sword, it could be an axe head, whatever. But basically, polearm is a long two-handed weapon. That was their primary weapon. Okay. Now let's, as far as the katana, it was used on the battlefield as a secondary weapon. It became most popular in the 17th and 18th century in Japan. And basically, this was a time of peace in Japan. And this was a time where basically samurai were not running around in full armor. They were unarmored, and in many cases, they kind of functioned as the police. And basically, they were using their swords mostly against unarmored people. And this sword is excellent for basically, dealing with people that don't have armor, because basically you're just slicing away with this. Okay. In that respect, the katana is basically very contemporary to the rapier. Okay. The rapier, kind of like the katana, did sometimes find its way onto the battlefield, particularly because as in the 16th and 17th century, we start seeing more guns on the battlefield. So because you start seeing more of these, early matchlocks and some dog locks and wheel lock, muskets. Basically what they started doing is they stopped wearing full plate armor, and they typically started wearing just a breastplate. So the overall weight of the armor was the same, but what they did is they concentrated just on the breastplate and the helmet, and they made those two pieces thicker. Okay, so you have the same amount of weight in terms of total armor, but it's just concentrated in the chest and the head. Okay, so when you think of like the conquistadors, who are wearing the they're wearing the breastplate and the helmet. That's the only part of the body that's really armored. And the reason is because those two pieces are reinforced. So because now you start seeing people that have less armor and they have more openings, a sword like this is effective because basically you can target the parts of the body that don't have armor. Okay, so that's how the rapier kind of found its way into the onto the battlefield. Okay, but the rapier was basically also used extensively, by civilians. It was a civilian weapon used by people who don't wear armor against other people that don't wear armor. So the katana and the rapier are contemporary. Okay, they are basically of the same class. Even though the katana is sharper and it will cut. I mean with this, yeah, you might cut a head off with this. You're not going to do this with the rapier, but a stab into your chest with this will get you just as dead as if you get your head cut off with one of these things. Okay. Another contemporary weapon of the katana is the German longsword. But I mean, we say German longsword because we kind of identify it with Lectionaro's manual, who was German. But it was also used in Italy. It was used in many places throughout Europe. And basically, yes, we have a long tapered blade. Okay, the blade is basically, it's not super stiff. Okay. So as you can see, when I press it, it has a bend. So you're not going to basically break open like mail rings or anything with this. The reason why this blade is so tapered is so that you can move it quickly. I can go from a guard here to a guard here. Come out, strike to the other side. So there's no weight down here. It's all back here, so I can move this sword very quickly. So this is a sword of speed. Okay. And basically, it did have an edge. It was sharp, but not as sharp as the katana because it basically did not need to be. Yes, they did use slicing cuts with this, but this will just cut just as well. Just making a hacking cut. One of the things to be aware is like the tip. Like if I try to make a tip cut, okay, the tip is not gonna bite as deep as if I cut further down the blade. Okay, so there's more mass back here. So you can see how that bit a lot deeper than when I tried to make just a tip cut. Okay, so see that's not biting very well at all. This is basically designed for thrusting, okay, into people that don't have armor. Okay, so all these three weapons, longsword, rapier, katana, okay, are all in the same class. They are best suited against unarmored opponents. Okay. Now, we're going to contrast with these two European swords, okay? One of the things that you'll notice is that this sword basically also has a tip, but this tip is very different than this tip, okay? First of all, this is a single-handed sword, so basically this is something that you can use with a shield, okay? And basically this tip does not bend, okay? This is a tip designed for stabbing. Okay, this is a stabbing. This is a stabbing tip. Basically, this is ideal. This is a giant ice pick. Okay, this is something that you use to get into the armpits, into the groin, into the eye slots of people who have armor. Okay, and this sword is definitely not sharp. It's got an edge on it, but this sword, it doesn't depend on that edge. Because this sword's got some weight behind it. Okay, so even though this tip is, it's a tip that seems to look like this, but this tip actually has a lot more mass at the end. The blade actually, it's fuller down here, right? Basically, this is carved out here to basically reduce the weight, but then up here it has it's basically a diamond section. It almost has like a rib that sticks out. And because it's got more more mass there, okay, you can basically, that tip will bite, okay? And then if you use this part of the sword, okay, that's basically gonna bite pretty deeply, okay, because it simply has more mass down here. And in all these cuts, basically I'm just dropping the sword, okay? I'm just dropping the sword, and the sword just basically, mass matters, okay? Mass matters. The heavier the sword is, and I don't mean heavier overall. All these swords are weigh less than 3 pounds. It's a question of how the weight is distributed, how the geometry of the blade is. So all these swords are less than 3 pounds, but they're specialized for certain purposes. So this is a war sword. This is something that would be used as a primary weapon on the battlefield. You would use this with a shield. Okay, this is basically a foot soldier sword because it's short. It's not something that I can use really well from horseback because I don't have that reach. This is designed for up close. Get into the armpits. Get into the eye socket. Get into the groin. Make your cut. Come back. Make your thrust. Okay, but this is a war sword. So this is in a different class than any of these 3 swords. Okay, so we got katana, we got longsword, we got rapier. That's in a totally different class. Those swords have more in common amongst themselves than these 2 swords have over here. This sword over here is a classic arming sword. Okay, 10th, 11th century, even into the 12th century. As you can see, it's long. It's got a long blade, which is great for horseback. Horseback, as you're going along, you're using the momentum of the horse to basically make your cuts, okay? It doesn't have a fine tip. I mean, there's a tip there, but it's not a fine tip because with this type of a sword, it's wide with this much mass out there. I mean, it's kind of hard to get really good point control. And if I try to make a hard thrust into mail, I mean, this sword is going to bend too much. So this is a cutting sword, okay? This is a sword that basically doesn't take too much effort to make a good cut. There it goes. Okay, there it goes. I'm just letting the weight of the sword come down and make the cut. Okay? So this is a cutting sword, ideal for using from horseback. Something that would have been used with a shield. Now, when you're using this on the ground with a shield, basically you're taking a sword that's basically meant for horseback, and you're making it work for you on foot. So, in order to make this sword work on foot, basically I need to use a lot of hip power, okay, and I also need to use a lot of rotational cuts, okay, in order to make this sword work, okay. But this is a knight sword, and a knight was basically a mounted warrior fighting from horseback. So that's one of the reasons why this style of a sword was so popular for such a long period of time. So this is the biggest difference between these 2 swords and those 2 swords. These swords are basically can be dedicated primary weapons. Okay, whereas on a battlefield, whereas these swords would have been used as backup weapons or civilian weapons, or for use in the policing function. This is, you don't want, I mean, I would prefer not to go into battle with something like this as my primary weapon. If I'm going to have a sword like this for battle, I'm also going to have a pistol, a wheel lock pistol, which would have been contemporary with this. So probably 2 of them, because because you couldn't, obviously those were single shot pistols. So I would have had 2 pistols. After I fired my 2 shots, then I would resort to this sword. Okay? So I think that might help some of you guys put these type of swords into context. Okay, so and the important thing to understand that the katana is basically, it's a light sword that if it was ever used in battle, which it was used primarily as a backup weapon, not as the primary weapon. Okay, whereas this sword over here, this is a primary weapon. This is a weapon that you can take into battle, with a shield or from horseback. and fight with something like this. So if you guys got any questions or comments, please post them. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not a member, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.